Hi, I'm Cesar Santos. As you know, I graduated from the Angel Academy of Art in Florence in 2006, and now I have the luxury to be with the founder, the designer of this program that influenced me and my career so much. Michael, John Angel, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Man.
It's fabulous to see you again.
My pleasure.
Absolutely fabulous. As you know, I've studied with, I studied under Pietro Annigoni, the great Italian painter, back in the late 1960s. I've known about Annigoni, of course, since he painted his first wonderful portrait of Queen Elizabeth II of England. When finally I came to Italy, actually to go to university, I wanted to come and meet the Maestro. I had a letter of introduction to him from a Canadian painter. I was fascinated by the fact of a realist back in the 1960s who had heard of a practicing realist. So it was fabulous to find out that he was there.
Were you studying art before?
And working. No, I was at university studying medieval and Renaissance poetry, which will get you a job anyway, man. I mean, it's anyway. I had a letter of introduction to the Maestro, so I came up to Florence. Introduced myself, and he said, "Well, we're painting this fresco in this tiny village, Ponte Borgonese, to the west of Florence. Would you like to join us?" So I said, "Well, yeah, I'd love to." And then, having accepted, I became really shy. And I said, "Well, you sure I won't get in your way?" And he said, "Well, if you do, I kill you." So I thought, okay, fair enough. He did almost once, so he threw me off the scaffolding.
How was that? It's a story. I heard of it and I never knew what was happening. So you were helping him?
I mean, I was 21 years old. I'd read that titanium white is very good in fresco, but what I hadn't read is that it's good in little bits, highlight on the nose or in the eyes, something like that. The guy who usually helped him, like his head of studio, was just nowhere to be found, a very eccentric man, nowhere to be found. So Annigoni said, "Get me some white." So sure, I got some titanium white, mixed it up in a bowl, brought it to him, spread it over this area, stood back, and he said, "That's not white." I thought, "Oh no, what have I done?" Anyway, I mean, this was, Christ, 50 years ago. I remember him though, being lifted off the floor of the scaffolding and just thrown away. And I went crashing through the guardrail. We were only 1.5 meters off the ground, but he was beside. Oh man, it hurts when I hit the ground. Man, it hurts.
Those type of stories must sound a little bit brutal to the generation now that is used to everything so nice, around a safe environment. They don't know that we grew up. I grew up in Cuba. It was more. I had that experience of the rough life, and you learn also by punishment in a way. Like if you have to be straight in a way. So that's
no, in the old days, I mean, in grammar school in England, we were beaten with canes, strapped, and it was corporal punishment. Made me the man I am today. But it was much rougher, as you said. Annigoni once, before my time, actually, an assistant, young guy, brought him a book with a reproduction of a Picasso in it, and he said, Maestro, look, it's really not bad. Apparently, Annigoni picked him up by the big guy, picked him up by the collar and by the belt and just threw him down the stone stairs. You see, back then he was the Maestro. The world was very, very, very different.
The respect was always first.
So he was really untouchable. He was a real character.
I think people were judging older people by their best, not their worst. And now we tend to look at the worst of people and then disrespect them because of that. Instead of saying, "Whoa, he's great at this." So
that's very true.
He needs that value,
That's very true.
It's a perception thing.
Really made me understand how, from a realist painter's point of view, a representational painter's point of view, how very little was being taught in the art school, in the universities and the art schools. So based on that, I started to research the old books, because a lot of the painters and the students of the painters from the past, going all the way back to the 1500s, kept notes. They wrote books, which are in archives. Now the "we" comes into place because this is, remember, before we all had computers. And my generation, a number of my generation, I'm very proud of them for this, a number of my generation did the same kind of research. I really want to learn this, I really want to. And bit by bit, we pieced together what the old teaching was, what it comprised. Once we all got computers, we actually found each other, so to speak. And it was really, really nice to find out that, we pretty well discovered the same thing. It's an ongoing, an ongoing crusade?
Research?
Research, no, it's an ongoing thing, yeah. Because there's a lot still to be learned. I mean, realism, representationalism in painting and in sculpture has come a long way since the 1960s, a long way. The art establishment, the newer people, the new scholars are starting to write intelligently about representational painting. I mean, the old dinosaurs are dying out, thank God, but they're still around a lot. There's a tremendous prejudice against what we do. But we are the avant-garde, we are the new wave.
We're not just going against the establishment in the art world just for breaking it. It's a need to really reconnect with people, reconnect with beauty, reconnect with art.
Yes.
And sometimes we can be called close-minded, and we are including hundreds of years of art instead of 100 or less than 100. So some people just base their lives and their taste on this little period that is new and ignoring this major movement that happened.
It's not so new anymore. The old,
it's not new anymore.
Whatever, the abstract stuff, whatever. It's not so new. This is 100 years old.
Let me ask you, because I want to get the beginning. I love finding out, and I never had the chance to talk to you about this. So when you started, when you were young, when you were a teenager, and you were studying Renaissance poetry, you grew this love for art, but not because you wanted to revolt against the contemporary. Meaning, you were never punished by the contemporary art mentality, no?
Not back then, no.
So you were just an honest movement forward. You said, okay, I'm learning this stuff, I want to share it. Yeah. So it became more of a pure thing. It's not like, oh, I don't like this, I'm against them, so let me show them. It's not about that. It's more about loving, oh my God, I found this, let's share it.
Yeah. Representational painters and sculptors actually make a very decent living. I mean, it's very hard work, because, it's long hours. It's not, I'll just float around for a few days and then spend half an hour painting. It's a lot of hard work. But it's real. There is a huge public interest out there, as opposed to the art establishment, which is into a totally different thing. But what really, really annoys me is that they then say that we are rubbish, which is absurd. I mean, we are the humanists. We are the movement of the future. Well, we're the movement right now, but I mean, the future is getting stronger and stronger. There's a lot still to be learned by modern representational painters. I mean, a lot of it is still pretty stiff. I was going to say badly composed, but not even composed. Yeah. It's just a matter of, oh, right, I'll copy that, and I'll call that a painting, Yeah. As opposed to the kind of painting that you do. You have this figure, let's say, a portrait or a whole figure or whatever, and you think, how does this fit into modern life? How can I bend the surround? You've gone through periods of drawing the chair that the person is sitting on, and so it was done by chalk and so on. This is fabulous. This opens all kinds of possibilities for representation. But instead of just it looks like that, therefore I'll copy this and then.
Do you think the academies, in a way, at the same time that they're helping the students through that narrow path and serious path of development, learning how their visual senses work and how to represent it with the tools and all that, do you think that as a byproduct sometimes they, without intention, because I know that here is one of the most open, I've talked to you before when I was studying here, and you were so open to living the individual freedom to express these things. But don't you think that sometimes the academies force that type of attitude in the students, and they're afraid of being free and doing stuff?
Oh yeah. I mean, everything yin yang, everything contains the germs of its own destruction, So the fact that working from casts, let's say, is so important to learn how to model form, But what the student doesn't understand, certainly doesn't absorb easily, is the fact that the casts are from sculptures, and the sculptors have already made them into works of art. They've already simplified them. They've already, I like the word, architecturalized them, so in that sense they're bigger than life. When you come to work from the model, from the library, you've got to do it yourself, and man, oh man, that's a whole other world. So the fact that we use casts and use site size is wonderful for learning how to render, because you can just simply see the differences, fix it. But it's very bad as you just said. It's very bad because it inculcates the idea that, oh, that's what realism is about, just copying. No, it's not at all. It's, well, it's a lot of things, but
it's
even
picture making. I like the one you said the other
day.
I
I like that word. Unfortunately, picture is a negative word these days with the art establishment. But picture making, the art of picture making. That's what we need to learn. You see so many works coming from graduates of other ateliers and academies that when they do a multi-figured thing, they are so fragmented. There's this figure, then there's that figure, then
they treat it
just as though they're stuck
yeah.
on. Yeah. As opposed to, you look at the old people who were painting this, it's all integrated. It all looks as though it's actually happening in that one room, rather than, this is a guy who lives 3 doors down, he's posing with a robe on, and that's, painting is much actually harder than that.
I remember one, actually, you're talking about that, it's funny because I took one aspect that you said one day to add the environment color, the background color into the halftones and use that to integrate the figures in space. What a nice principle to follow to solve that problem of individuals, how to put them together.
I am always saying, there are no rules in painting, but there are principles. And you've got to learn them, there are principles of gravity. Like if I hold something and I drop it, it's going to fall down. There's nothing I can do about it. So in painting, it's the same deal. If I do this, then this will be the result. If I do that, that will be the result. And I have to understand where these things come from. Then I have to learn how to manipulate them to make them do what I want.
I'm really fascinated by your early paintings. They're so nice. That's what made me decide to come here and study under you instead of the other academies in Florence. Is because I saw that you had that soul of an artist, and the finished look, even of a simple portrait, looked like nothing I've seen before. It had that mystery that the masters had. So I said, I wanna know what that is. But looking at your early paintings, you created this stuff, so you yourself were breaking those rules.
Yeah.
What about the piece that you have with the window? It's a little surrealistic, and there's the guy. I love that piece. So what was the theme for that?
Oh, that's a long time ago. And it's a tempera painting.
Just sensational, because that's what it is. I love that when you create art, it goes beyond even your capacity to understand it, And it has that feeling of the mystery, but man, such
we are dreamers, hopefully something in there is working well. But allegory has always been my interest. And an allegory, of course, you can't explain. The whole purpose of an allegory is that the person looking at it must figure out what it means to him or her. Because actually, an allegory is not about whatever out there. It's about who am I? Because as you think these things through, you're actually exploring yourself. And that's what an allegory is. So my Rampant, my Courtyard series, I did a series of them actually, is that, it's an invitation to explore, to question yourself, like a dream. I'm a great Jungian.
Amazing that we are two parts, and one we think we know it, but we don't know it because it's combined with that other part that we are mysterious.
Since my days with Annigoni, or just after them, being aware that there really, back then, were no schools that really taught this stuff or specialized in it. And I personally wanted to learn it. I know a bunch of people who, on a very amateur level, wanted to, learn. So I started giving lessons in my studio, and that's really where it started. And then one thing led to another. More and more people wanted to do it. One of the things I'm constantly fighting with people about is that this is conceptual. Yes, you have to look, you have to be able to analyze, make a thing look real, but it's really about concept.
Yeah.
In the good old days, say in Venice in the 1500s, a portrait painter such as Titian would not only describe the features of the sitter, he would also describe the whole type, so that the person, the sitter, becomes actually the embodiment of a whole type. So a business person is a business person. A prince is a prince. A beautiful, famous beauty embodies that entirely. And that's what portrait painting has to be, I think. It's more than just, you not take a photograph of the person.
Character. Right?
Yeah, you have to somehow conceptualize it so that the vision is bigger than just copying what a nose looks like. I'd like to say, in Platonic terms, that it's a matter of getting at the eternal behind the specific. You have to look through your model. You need to work, well, not with, but work through your model to find some image that will represent a big idea. That's my take on poetry.
That's what I loved about your take here. Actually, what I loved about this is that visual poetic feeling of rendering the form so beautiful. I mean, nobody can do still lifes like this school. It's tough to get the figure to that level, but what it does is also unmatched, you know, because you really feel the person is breathing almost, and you feel the space behind it. It's not just a cool picture. That story that you have with for students to understand light versus shadow. And you said separate them into families. You made it so clear. Can you tell us?
Yeah, I mean, it's very important when you're rendering something to keep the shadow family and the light family of values separate. The lightest dark must always be darker than the darkest light. There are some exceptions to that, but by and large, 95%, certainly at the beginning, you have to take that as absolutely true. It's like Romeo and Juliet, you know, the Montagues and the Capulets. They have to be separate. As soon as Romeo and Juliet got together, the whole bloody thing fell apart and was tragic.
And that happens in paintings every time. Every time you see a dark halftone and a light shadow, it's...
Or, you know, people make a reflected light in the shadows of light as something in the lights. Because they had heard that, well, if you add reflected lights, it adds all the more volume. Well, it's true, but not if you make the damn thing too light, because then the shadow family starts to resemble the light family, and boom, everything becomes two-dimensional.
What do you have to say about the biology is against us painters? The way we see stuff, it creates more contrast. So even when you explain it like that, I'm sure someone looks at the reflected light and says, but I see it so light. You know?
Well, that's true. I mean, when you're looking in the shadows, your eyes open up. You can't, your pupils open up. You can't stop that happening. You can't even be aware of it happening. So yeah, the more you stare at the shadows, which one tends to do when you're rendering the shadows, of course the reflected light seems light, and vice versa. You know, when you're staring at the lights, your eyes close down, so the halftones seem to be way too, you know, much darker than they actually are. One of the many skills you have to develop is to be able to look at the whole all the time. Like even if you're looking for some detail in the shadows, you still have to keep the majority of the lights in your vision. Until actually the very early 20th century, even within the first quarter of the 20th century, everybody actually had to learn how to draw and paint. Everybody. It was just part of your natural, normal education. So they knew how bloody hard this was. So that when they saw painting done by somebody who could actually paint, wow, did they ever know what was involved? Yeah. It makes a big difference.
Man.
Yeah. Another story, flip side of this, is some years ago, Art Institute in Chicago, in the school. Christmas had come and most of the life drawing class had gone home for Christmas. The life drawing instructor, whose name I can't remember, so I won't be indiscreet, said, "Oh, I'll set up my paper with you and I'll draw along with you." Apparently, after 10 minutes, he had made such a mess on the paper, such an absolute mess. And he said then, whoever thought this was so difficult? He had never drawn before.
Wow.
He had never drawn before. And this was the instructor of the Art Institute.
Wow.
I know.
No, but I can see that happening. I mean, it's incredible. But that's a good idea. We should have everybody start drawing.
Because then you know, man.
Try it.
Then you
wow.
know. Yeah.
Well, in a way, I always thought that you can teach like kids to draw in a way because they're learning how to write, and the A is different than the E, and the difference is small and the detail. So in a way, they're kind of drawing and how difficult it is to make a letter. So if that's so difficult, of course.
You get in the interesting thing too with kids. A long time ago, I taught a couple of classes with public school kids, I guess. And we had a model. I mean, not nude, you know, dressed, but still. If the model was sitting in such a way that the kids could not see the arm, they could not see that they could not see the arm. They put it through the arm. Which again, you know, I mean, that's really interesting, but boy oh boy, I mean, that really points out the kind of thing that a teacher, a good instructor, has to deal with, because we carry that stuff with us. Coming back to shadows, you know, a lot of the shadows on the figure are lost in the surrounding. You can't see it.
Yeah.
So why are you drawing it?
Yes.
Black it out.
Yeah.
And then it looks more real because that's what things look like.
Yeah,
And it's very hard to get people to take the plunge.
Get rid of the preconceptions. Like the preconceptions are the ones dominating their vision. Huh? It's funny. So kids actually invented cubism. Nah,
that's right. That's right.
Once Picasso just wanted to copy kids.
Well, doesn't he say that? That it took him years to learn how to draw like a child, whatever.
Sure. Awesome. It has been great. Man, I learned so much. Everything that you guys are hearing here.
He is wonderful. He is brilliant. You really are one of the greats. I really mean that.
Man, and let me tell you, man, I repeat so many things that you say and that you said when I was studying here, and they know it now because the way you're describing the whole program, that's what I say all the time. So all the stuff I say came from this guy right here.
He's exaggerating, but he's lovely. Yeah.
Amazing, man.
Thank you
so much. Anyway, so good. Thank you, John Angel, for creating the Angel Academy. Now let's wrap this video up. We all call you Maestro. Now you know why. No wonder all the angels have ability to fly.